Today I've got a bit of acoustic blues for you. I put together a little piece which combines chords and fills. It's quite a fun one to play. You can learn the piece note for note should you want to, but more broadly speaking, what I'm going to be discussing in this video is my approach to playing in the open position, so down in this area of the neck where you've got lots of nice options with open strings, droning notes and so on, interesting chord voicings. And I'm also going to talk about the way that I like to connect my chord shapes with scales and arpeggios and melodic ideas in such a way that you're able to go fluently from playing chords to playing licks and solo ideas and go back and forth between those two approaches. So let's get started. Well, there we are. I'm playing today with my Martin 0015M guitar, M for mahogany. 00 is just a reference to the slightly smaller body size. I do enjoy playing this guitar. It's very comfortable to play and I think it sounds good for this kind of blues stuff. Got quite a warm tone. It's not too zingy on the top end. There's not too much woolliness on the low end, so it's a nice balanced sound. And I've chosen to play today with a pick. I think I'm sometimes using pick and fingers, but you can play this kind of blues style however you want. Sometimes I might do this kind of thing with finger style or use a thumb pick, so all of that stuff will work. And before we get into the details of this piece, I just wanted to discuss my overall approach. As I mentioned earlier, I do like to have my chord shapes, arpeggios, scales, licks, all of that stuff kind of organised on the fretboard, so you've got these options. It's really just a palette of different sounds that you've got that you can then mix and match throughout a kind of piece like this. So we're just dealing with a 12-bar blues in E here. It's a straightforward 12-bar, no fancy chords or substitutions or anything like that. So what I'm thinking here is about the basic chords that we're dealing with here. So the 1, 4, 5 chords in the key of E. So perhaps if we start with the 1 chord, and as I say, I'm concentrating on the open position here. You could play this stuff all over the fretboard, but just for the purposes of this lesson, of this video, I'm talking about this zone of the fretboard. And if we just start with our basic open E chord, our 1 chord, and if you want a bit more of a bluesy sound, you can make that an E7. And the E7, it means that you've got that D note in there, which is the flat 7. That's what gives you that dominant 7th chord sound. So there, if you just lift up your 3rd finger, you're allowing that open 4th string to ring. That's giving you that 7th flavour. There are various different ways of playing that chord. Alternatively, you could put your pinky down on this D note here, so that again, that's the flat 7, but it's an octave higher. Or you could do a combination of those two things, so the open D and the fretted D. And also just exploring other E or E7 harmonies in this area of the neck. So you've got this one here, which I quite like. So it's got a D string root here, so fret 2, 4, 3 and 4. And you can just play the top part of that chord if you like. That's nice. I also quite like this one here. Really nice sounding chord. You've got the 3rd in the bass here, so it's an inversion of an E7 chord. You can think about it like this: if you got the previous chord that I was talking about. If you take that top note, the G sharp, and put it down in the bass instead, then you've got this inversion, so E7 over G sharp. So in terms of fret numbers, we've got fret 4, muting the 5th string, then fret 2, 4, 3, and muting the top string. So that's a nice sounding chord. And then around those chord shapes, I like to organise scales, arpeggios, licks, bits of musical vocabulary, and I do this no matter what style of music I'm playing, but since we're talking about blues in this video, then I think the most important scales we're going to need are minor pentatonics and major pentatonics, and often a blend of those two things. And it's important to see how they work down in the open position. I think as guitarists there is perhaps an overemphasis on the caged shapes, which are generally played without any open strings, and then the open position is kind of a bit of an afterthought. But I think it's worth studying the open position and the options that you've got as something in its own right, because there's a lot of character to be found down there. So first things first, let's find our minor pentatonic scale, and this works really nicely in the open position in the key of E. So we've just got this. All of the open strings available to you with the E minor pentatonic there. You can add in the flat 5th, of course, for a blues scale. And then you've got the major pentatonic as well. And this one doesn't work quite so nicely in the open position, but there are some options that you've got. So maybe something like that would work. So you've got some open strings available, but not all of them. You can start obviously with the open low E, and then climbing up in this area of the fretboard here, you've just got 2, 4, 2, 4, 2, 4. Then you've got the major third here, and then we have got some open string action going on here. So open 2 and open 2 on the top couple of strings. You might like to think about arpeggios, so an E7 arpeggio, and this is important because it gives you your chord tones, it gives you your strong notes. I wouldn't necessarily improvise just using arpeggios, but they're there to kind of guide me and to give me good notes to land on and emphasize, and I will mix those arpeggio notes in with scales, chromatic notes, and that kind of thing. So an E7 arpeggio, we want a root, 3rd, 5th, and flat 7. So in the open position you could play that like this. So quite a few open strings available to you there. It's just open, and then the 4th fret, that's root 3rd, then the 5th, flat 7, root 3rd, 5th, flat 7, root, and you've got this high 3rd on top. You could also perhaps think about the E Mixolydian mode. That's the 7-note scale that fits a dominant 7th chord sound. So it's like a major scale, but you've got a flat 7 in there. And this also works really well using some open strings. So it's quite an easy one to remember this. You've got open 2, 4, open 2, 4 on the lowest 3 strings. It's just the same fingering. Got 1 and 2, and then open 2, 3, open 2 and 4. So a nice way of playing that scale. You could of course play this without using so many open strings, but the open strings just have a nice sound. You can leave those notes droning away, and you can just get lots of nice licks and ideas using those open strings. So So that's lots of nice E or E7 material that you've got there, and you can mix all of that stuff together, go from chords to scales to arpeggios, you know, wherever your ear takes you. And then you can do the same thing with the other 2 chords in the blues. We can actually start with an A chord, open A. To make that an A7, we can just allow the open G to ring. That gives us our 7th chord. An alternative way of playing that would be like this. So we've got the G note on top, so I tend to play this with a bar with my first finger, and then my 3rd finger is playing that G. And you could also do this, which is the same inversion that I was doing on the E chord. So here we've got the C sharp in the bass, which is the 3rd, and then I've got this A7 chord on top. So it's a nice sounding first inversion A7 chord. And then I'll just zip through the pentatonic options as well. So the minor pentatonic scale works really well here. So all of the open strings available there, apart from the open 2nd string. We could try an A major pentatonic. So what about the A7 arpeggio? So root 3rd, 5th and flat 7. Usually like to start on the root, go up to the highest note, then come down to the lowest available note before finishing on the root. That way you're really hearing it with A as the root note. And why not have the A Mixolydian mode as well? So then for the 5 chord for B7, you've got this open chord voicing. Here you could play this shape, which is like an A form of the B7 chord. So in terms of frets, it's 2, 4, 2, 4 and 2. Or you could play it like this. So with the 7th on top, this is like our A7 but moved up higher. I could play it like that. I might just play the top part of that chord sometimes. And then in exactly the same way you can have your scales. So minor pentatonic, major pentatonic, arpeggios as well. I won't go into all of that in this video, but I will write some of that stuff out in the accompanying lesson materials, the tabs that I'm going to put up on the Patreon page. All right, moving on to my little piece then. And really what I'm doing here is just taking all of that harmonic and melodic information that I just discussed and mashing it all together. And this is the kind of thing that comes out. And it's a fairly loose arrangement. It's semi-improvised. I did try and streamline it a little bit just so it's going to be easier to learn. But once you're familiar with these kind of materials, you can more or less improvise this stuff. And I think the most important things here are rhythm. So keeping a steady rhythm, obviously, but also knowing where you are in the blues form at any given moment. So knowing that you're on the 1 chord or the 5 chord, for example, and knowing how long you're on that kind of chord. And then once you've got that framework in place, you can be quite free with where you place the chords, where you place the fills and melodic ideas, and the way you balance that stuff is really up to you. I think because the blues form is so strong and so familiar, you don't have to outline every single chord all of the time, though you can do if you want to. So feel free to tweak that balance. I think with my piece, I started off having quite a lot of harmonic and chord information, and then in my second 12 bars it went over to more single note lines. But still, with those single note lines, you're going to be outlining the chord changes by hitting chord tones and outlining the harmony in a melodic way by the note selection. And I kick things off with this. So a standard blues turnaround idea. I'm actually starting in the last 2 bars of the 12 bar, which is quite a common thing to do. So bars 11 and 12, and it's just based on this little double stop shape, which I'm just taking down 1 fret at a time. So I'm hitting the low E string, and then I've got 5 on the A and 4 on the G. And just taking that down. If you like, you can mute the string in between, then you can play both notes with the pick. So So I'm just letting my second finger just lean into the fourth string just to muffle it. And you can articulate that in various different ways. So strike those two strings together, or kind of go between the two notes in that double stop shape. And then we get here, we're arriving at our E7 chord, our 1 chord, and then I'm just hitting the 5 chord, the B7, just to take us back to the top again. So walking up to the root note and then strumming the chord. So that's a little introduction. Next I did this. So a simple double stop idea once again. So on the 1 chord I'm playing this. So we're dealing with 6 here, so double stop 6. So 2 on the D, 2 on the B, that's our shape. I'm playing this with fingers 2 and 3. Just taking it down and then to the open strings. And when I hit those open strings, those are chord tones. So it's the flat 7 and the 5th of our 1 chord. So you can throw in some other notes from the chord. In particular, that bass note helps sort of ground the whole sound. And I'm playing these double stops with a bit of hybrid picking here. So my pick is on the 4th string. I'm using the middle finger on the 2nd string. Then I'm going to the 4 chord. So there's a quick change in the 2nd bar to the A7. It's got a little bass run up to the root of the 4 chord. And then that's the same lick that I've transposed to fit over the 4 chord. So that double stop shape, I'm just moved it over to the next pair of strings. And then back to the 1 chord. And then I'm going up to this shape here. So this is the chord that I mentioned earlier. It's our E7 grip like this. It's like a D7 chord that you're just moving up higher. I'm just playing this little 3-note shape here, so frets 4, 3 and 4. Then we head to the 4 chord. So I'm thinking out of this chord shape here, but I'm playing a little melody on the top string. So I'm holding down this C sharp, that's the 3rd, and then I've got 3, 2 and open on the top string. Back to the 1 chord, and I've got a single note line. So I'm starting off by going chromatically up to the major 3rd and then just descending. A proper bluesy mixture of major and minor pentatonics there. Next we hit the 5 chord. So I hit the bottom part of that B7 and then just a little B7 lick there. So I'm thinking B minor pentatonic over the 5 chord there. Or even B blues scale, because I've got that F note in there. So that's all fitting our 5 chord, then the 4 chord. So some single notes there. So thinking about our arpeggio. So that lick coming straight out of that A7 arpeggio, and then we're back home to the 1 chord. That's very similar to the introduction. And then in the second 12 bars it gets a little bit more single notey, and I start off with this lick. So that's taking us from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, starting off on that major third. So major pentatonic, then walking up, that's the third of the 4 chord, and strumming the chord at the end of the phrase. And on the 1 chord I play this. So a nice kind of droning idea here. So I've got 4 and 3 on the 3rd string, but I've got droning open top strings. And then some E major pentatonic. So we hit the 4 chord. So starting off with our chord shape and just sliding into the major third, so minor to major third, a classic bluesy sound. And there I'm coming down the Mixolydian scale, A Mixolydian, and connecting that back to the 1 chord. Little droning idea, so 4, 3 and open, and a little major pentatonic idea, and we hit the 5 chord. I think I go up to this shape for the 5 chord, so at the 4th fret and then the flat 7 on top. And then to the 4 chord, hitting that major third again, and then just coming down the E blues scale essentially. And then another classic blues turnaround lick to finish. So you're coming down on the B string, but I've got a droning open high E string as well. And then just to finish off, I'm taking that D7 chord shape and moving it up chromatically until we hit the E7, our 1 chord. So essentially that's what's going on here, and by all means you can learn this piece note for note if you want to, but perhaps the best approach might be to really understand what's going on here and how to think about this stuff, and then you'll find that quite quickly you're able to put these materials together in your own way and come up with improvisations and pieces along similar lines of your own. Alright, that's it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If acoustic blues is your thing, I'm assuming it's your thing if you've watched this video all the way up to the end, then I have done a few other acoustic blues videos. If you just do a search on my channel, you should be able to locate those. Of course, if you want tab to accompany this video, then that's going to be up on the Patreon page. And I do spend quite a lot of time every week writing out these tabs, making them as accurate and as beautiful as I can. There's quite a big archive of older stuff on there now as well, so check that out if you're interested. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.